Hello YouTube. Today, 5 applications of the principle of shocking the muscle. I made a video explaining the concept and the things I disagreed with when it came to actually using it in the gym to get bigger. Now what I did was I went on Google and I typed shocking the muscle. I did what any beginner is going to do when they hear the term, and I'm taking the very first result, meaning that the number one thing that pops up on Google with the picture of the guy who's ripped and he's trying to sell you supplements, that's what I'm going to go off from. And it gives me 5 points, 5 techniques to shock any muscle into growth. So I'm going to review them and explain why they could work and why they most likely won't work. And because it comes from the website called therippedathlete.com, I needed to be shirtless to show that I'm ripped and shredded, right? Which means I'm an athlete. Every single person with a six-pack is an athlete. That's established now. And if you're fat, you're not an athlete. Okay, let's start. 1, train the muscle group 2 days in a row. Sometimes to shock the muscle, you have to resort to unconventional things. Okay, here, that's an actually interesting concept because many people don't understand that when you damage a muscle fiber, let's say you damage it 80%, you do not need to wait so that the recovery gets the muscle back to 0%. The only application of that is top performance. If you want to be fully performant, you need to let the muscle recover fully. But if you train for hypertrophy, why do you care about performance? This is actually a valid thing, and it's a concept that is not discussed enough. Full recovery of a muscle is overrated for hypertrophy. Now, there are certain issues with not letting the muscle recover. One, it's not an exact science because if, let's say the threshold is 100% and then after that, the muscle cannot go back to baseline. Let's say you don't let the muscle recover enough and it's 70% and you push it back to 110%. This 10% of tonnage that went to waste or even could potentially lead to an injury, right? So that is why that practice is usually not preached for beginners because they don't have the ability to assess that. But for people who are more advanced, your frequency does not need to be every 48 hours. You can hit a muscle group every 24 hours if you want it. It's actually a good way to approach nucleus overload because you will not be fully recovered, but let's say you have a heavy lat day where your lats are destroyed. The next day, you can do a light movement to throw some blood in there. Yeah, you're not recovered at all, but it's not going to lead to any injuries and it might lead to extra growth. So that's a good way to shock the muscle. Doesn't mean that your muscle is going to be like, oh, he's training me 2 times in a row, I have to grow now. It's just that you are modifying the frequency and the approach and you are slightly changing the parameters of recovery. So you're getting a little bit extra, meaning that instead of going to 100% for your lats, waiting 4 days and then going again, you're going to 100%, going down to 80%, and then 100% again. So you got 120% of muscle fiber damage instead of the 100%. That's where the growth comes from. So that's a good thing. 2, increase your reps. It's easy to get stuck in a rut of working in the separate range week after week, blah, blah, blah. That shouldn't even be said. Yes, you need to increase your reps. That's why evolving rep ranges are so good, is because they promote progression through the increase of reps. They also take the onus of progressive overload away from starting weight on the bar. This is the issue of 5x5, 3x5. It's not that they're bad per se, it's that the only way you progress on them is get the reps and then you put weight. That's your progression. With an evolving rep range, you will get extra reps every session. That's progress. And then on top of that, because your evolving rep range is going to reverberate and go back to the beginning at some point, now you're putting weight on the bar. So you're doing both. Do not let yourself be stuck in one or the other. I know people who are stuck in one, meaning that they will change the reps all the time, but they will never change the weight. Like they'll be at 225 on the bench for the rest of their lives. This is also damaging your ability to progress, and it's not good for hypertrophy. Do not be a bodybuilder that only does volume or a wannabe powerlifter who only does intensity. You need both in combination. And this is why also people who talk about the biological law of adaptation, for the most part, don't realize that exercise selection changes is not the only way to avoid that. volume and intensity manipulation should be your number one recourse to avoid that. So that's another thing. See, that website isn't so bad. They're ripped athletes, of course, they know what they're talking about. 3, use rest pause. So on this one, I'm actually going to go in the website because I'm sure that they have more to say about that. I was just using the thing that popped up for anyone who wanted to actually type those things. I want to learn more about what they say. So they say that rest pause allows you to overload your muscles to stimulate more growth because you perform more reps that you'll normally be able to do with a given weight in a given set with shorter rest periods in between. So you get 6 rep max on the bench with 250 pounds and then so basically what they say is you take the set. I'm not really familiar with that because I've never really done that. Instead of saying I want 6 reps, you say I want reps and you do 2 or 3, then you rest, then you do 2, 3 more, then you rest, and you do more, and then blah, 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 blah. Why is that potentially not a good idea? One, because you are going to always be shy of failure for the first few iterations of these because you're going to stop before the intensity peaks. And when you do reps, even though if you use 10 reps, you're not doing it, or rather you're not doing the very first reps at a very high intensity. But what's interesting is that if you're still in a good intensity window, the first few reps are going to be super intense because you're super close to failure. Here, this is sort of avoiding failure. And really what you want with your sets, if you want them to be hard sets and to be beneficial for hypertrophy, is you want them to always result in muscular failure or close, meaning that you're going to failure and not actually failing. Also, that type of training is going to be either, unless you're really anal about it and you really time every single rest pose, it can potentially lead to increased poses that are going to increase the performance, but in reality, you're not getting stronger. You're just letting the muscle rest more. So it's increasing the potential artificial increase in performance that is actually not happening. You're just deluding yourself into thinking you're getting better. And they say that this overload the muscles with more work. Yeah, but you could just do more sets and it would be easier to track your ability to go back to baseline also. And it puts your muscle under tension longer. I would say no, because you are resting. If I do 6 reps, even if you got 7 or 8, because you always resetted, the portion of time in which the muscle was under tension with the max intensity is lower. And also, if you think about it, this is a method that's going to take more time. And you might think, well, it's only going to be a difference of a few seconds. Yeah, but when you add it up at the end of a week and then a month, then a year, that actually makes up for a lot. That's the type of method that for someone who needs a ton of tonnage is going to eventually lead to a tonnage leak. So it's not awful, but it should never be applied to every single lift. And they're not saying to do that, right? You can try it for certain lifts. I think that for presses, especially vertical presses, it's actually good. Do no rest drop sets. So basically a drop set. Drop sets are good, but for the same reason that I explained before, they should not be a go-to. Why? Because when you do a drop set, you are artificially increasing the intensity of the set. And that's something that you already do when you do high reps, technically. But the difference is that with high reps, you're still within an intensity window that is going to put you to failure within 8, 10, 12 reps. When you do drop sets, the muscle is pre-fatigued and therefore you are using sub-maximal weight afterwards with a muscle that doesn't have the capacity to produce the power anymore. So of course the reps are going to be lower. That is still an exercise taking place within an intensity window that for your absolute potential is not the best. It's the same logic as what I said for number 1. When you work your muscle the very next day and they're not recovered and you're weaker, it's not optimal. Why? Because the absolute strength of the muscle and the ability to break muscle fibers is not there. So yeah, you're struggling with the weight, but you're struggling with the weight because you're using a muscle that is not fully repaired yet. And it's sort of the same logic here, but within the set. So it's fine to employ that method sometimes, but don't do it too often. And as you see, there is a common theme with these things, with shocking the muscle. It shouldn't be an obsession. You shouldn't always be trying to shock the muscle. You should have some sort of routine, some sort of monotony, because that's what strength training is to lead to hypertrophy. It's going to be monotonous. You're going to repeat the same things again and again. And buying into that type of mentality where you're always trying to find something new to not be bored, or always chasing the pump, is going to result in poor results. And 5, and that's the very last one, pre-exhaust your muscles. So you do a single joint exercise before a compound movement, so that the muscle that you pre-fatigued is going to be easier to target. I like this. I do that for my chest, for example. Some people have found great benefits for the glutes on the squats and the deadlift where they pre-activate it. That being said, I don't call that pre-exhaustion. I call that activation, because I'm not actually exhausting the muscle. That's the difference. If you do that with a resistance band and you just get the muscle fired up, you're not going to lose any performance. You're actually going to gain performance. If you do that with a cable and you actually isolate that muscle, you're going to lose performance. And I always tell people to be very careful with supersets, including muscle groups that were worked already. Why? Because if that muscle group is fatigued and that muscle group is integral to maintaining mechanical integrity, you might reach a mechanical failure faster, which can lead to injury. So you need to be very selective with the type of exercise you apply that mentality to. That being said, out of the list, that's actually the one I like the most. So I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to rank those from top to last. So pre-exhaust the muscle is number 1. It's the best one. Increase your reps is of course number 2, but that should be a given. It shouldn't even be ranked in there because you should already be doing that. I'm going to actually say that train the muscle group 2 days in a row is number 3 as far as practices go. Use rest pause is going to be number 4, tied with do not press drop sets, because for me they're the least beneficial. And that is coming to you from a website that is full of pictures of fake natties. So that's going to be that for the day. Thank you for watching. Any comments or question I will answer. Have a good day.